So I want to talk about mdBook, and mdBook is something I've been using a lot in my personal journey with programming, and also my professional journey. And it essentially is a documentation tool. Now, if you do anything with Rust, you probably recognize it, because it's the main tool that's used to generate the Rust book online, and the Rustonomicon, and many other online books. So what the agenda is today, I'm going to talk about what mdBook is. Well, I've kind of done that already, but I'm going to go a bit further detail, of course. I'm going to talk about the key features. I'm going to talk about how you set up an mdBook project. I'm going to talk about the lingua de franca of Markdown, of mdBook is Markdown, hence it's called mdBook, md being Markdown. I'm going to talk about how we go about customizing the appearance. I'm going to then demonstrate writing a simple book using it. And then I'm going to talk about Mermaid Diagrams and what they are, and what they bring to the mdBook ecosystem. And then I'm going to wrap up with just some minor notes of what else it can do that I haven't really talked about, or won't talk about in too much detail, and then leave it open for questions and answers. Now, this is going to be a quick talk. There isn't really much to say. mdBook is very simple to use and understand. So feel free to interrupt me and ask me questions at any time. If you're the kind of person who likes to write questions on the meeting chat, it is possible that I might not notice. So if other people do, they can poke me and tell me to take a look. Okay. So what is mdBook? As I said before, it's a utility to create a modern online books for Markdown files. And now Markdown is a pretty popular format now. It's ubiquitous. You'll probably come across it, especially if you used Git with GitHub or GitLab.com. And it's designed primarily for technical documentation. So I'm looking at the presentation off to my other monitor here, because Zoom is unable to show my main monitor to share, which is really unfortunate. So the basic mdBook was inspired by Gitbook. Gitbook was something very similar, and the writers of mdBook wanted to create an alternative to this, which is much simpler and also written in 100% Rust. And it is aimed to be very fast and very easy to use. So the comparison, some other documentation tools you might recognize. Some of these. Gitbook is very similar, as I said, but mdBook is a lot more straightforward to use. Sphinx is another documentation system. You can find a lot of websites that have used Sphinx, and Sphinx is very sophisticated and complex and does a lot of stuff. But it has that really steep learning curve, whereas mdBook you can learn, if you know especially if you know Markdown, mdBook you can learn in minutes. And so mdBook is more suitable for smaller projects and simpler documentation, but don't be frightened of writing large documentation with mdBook. There is some facilities to help with that. And then there's Jekyll is another common thing, but that's more of a static site generator. But they both work in a similar kind of thing. You provide some information, and something gets generated at the other end. So the key features of mdBook. Well, it's got Markdown support, which is probably the most popular documentation markup language there is. I use it all the time. I prefer to HTML or XML or any kind of RTF. In my opinion, this is the best markup language for writing documentation. It handles syntax highlighting and supports a lot of languages, including Rust, including C++, many languages. You can just drop code in, and it will format it as code with using a mono font and syntax highlighted according to that language. It has theming capabilities. It's especially if you do the HTML background, you can add CSS, override CSS, and add JavaScript and things like that. Talking about the multiple output formats, it uses various backends. The default one is HTML, and that's the one I'll be showing off. But you are able to produce PDFs and EPUB books as well. It is extensible with plugins, and I will be showing one of those plugins. The plugin in question is the one that does Mermaid Diagrams, and of course it's 100% Rust. And as we all know, that means it's blazingly fast. So setting up mdBook, it's quite simple. You just do cargo install mdBook. That's literally it. And once it's installed, you can go into a folder and you type in mdBook in it and then the name of your project. That will set up a bunch of files. It will actually set up two directories. One called book, which will be empty, and that will eventually contain all the output of the HTML, the CSS, and whatever is generated. And one will be a src, source directory. That is where you're going to put all your Markdown files. And then in the root is going to be a book.toml file. I've typed capital B there, but it's little b actually as a file produced. And that just contains the meta information. You put the author, the language, and the title, and so forth. So I'm just going to go over a brief overview of what Markdown looks like, just in case some of you have not even seen it. On the left is essentially what you type in a text editor. Markdown is basically a way of writing rich text, but with a very simple format. So the idea is that Markdown is quite readable, even before you render it. So you use hashes for setting up the titles. You can use asterisks or hyphens or even plus signs to set up bullet points. You can wrap words in asterisks or underscores for doing italic, bold, or bold and italic, depending on how many you wrap it with. Numbered lines can just use just the number and a dot, and that isn't a typo. It doesn't care what the numbers are. If you just put one dot in every single line, it will count it up properly when it's being rendered. And you can use a greater than sign to do quoted text, which basically draws a thick line on the left, just so you get that quote text format. And on the right is something I rendered that Markdown in Visual Studio Code, because in Visual Studio Code has a plugin that allows you to preview Markdown, and that's the kind of thing you expect to see. Further on, you can do code blocks. In the text I showed there, I've used 3 quotes to mark a code block. That's actually got 3 backticks you will use. Unfortunately, I can't put 3 backticks inside a Markdown file and still show the 3 backticks. The slides that I'm showing you right now is actually written in Markdown 2 using a different tool. But once you put the 3 backticks, you put the name of the language that you want to format to next to it. In this case, I've chosen C, and you just write the code. And as you can see on the right in the render, you can see it syntax highlighted. Images, you put an exclamation mark. You put the text, the alternative text. So when you hover your mouse over it, or when the picture doesn't appear, that is what's going to be shown. And then in the parentheses, that's the file name. And that file name could be a local file name, or it could be a URL to some sort of picture on a foreign website. It also supports tables, so you can do tables in ASCII art kind of way, and it supports headers and so forth. If you're doing links, you can do links similar to the image markup, except without the exclamation mark. The text between the braces is the brackets is the text you'll see actually rendered on the documentation. The text in the parentheses is the link, and you can do it for websites, URLs, or you can do it to reference local files. So you can have links to other Markdown files as part of your documentation. And you can get more information about how you use Markdown by going to this URL right here. So with Markdown, you can customize the appearance. You can choose the built-in themes. This involves just downloading CSS files and then referring to it as that's the theme you want. That's kind of beyond the scope of this talk. I haven't really delved in too much with it. I quite like the default schemes as it is, but that freedom is there. And you can do that by just adding the additional CSS through the in the book.toml file by adding this toml section right here. You could also add a favicon. If for people who don't know, a favicon icon is the icon that appears in your tab. If you look in your browser next to the title of the website, that little icon is called a favicon, and you can choose those as well. So I'm now going to switch over to my command line, and I'm going to show you how I would do a Markdown book. So I'm going to type in localhost 3000 here, and right now this is not going to work because there's no server running. But right here I've just got an empty folder, and I can start a new project by just type in name like this, and it'll ask me if I want a git ignore to be added. So what will be added to that git ignore is that book folder, because you don't want to submit your generated files. So I'll say yes for that, and I'm going to call this awesome documentation, because we all know deep down this documentation will be awesome. Right, so it now created this folder. We'll go into it, and we can see those directories and files as expected. So if I look at the book, it's pretty much just meta information, and I'll go in. If I go into the source directory, by default you'll see a couple of files. Now the summary MD is the contents, and you need this. This is the glue that brings all your Markdown documents into a book. So if I look at that, you can see that there's a title, summary, and there's a bullet point which has a link to chapter 1. And I can look at the chapter 1, and I know it's just a title right now. So let's go ahead and we can build this. So if I type in mdBook by itself, you get your typical Rust CLI command line help done by the clap crate, and you can just type in mdBook build. Let's type in help for that, and here you can do various other commands. But for now, I'm going to do build, and I'm going to type in open. And what that will do is going to build the HTML and then open the browser. Oh, I'm in the wrong directory. Let's try that again. Here we go. So we now opened the actual indexed HTML that was generated, and we can see on the left the chapter 1. And you can click on those, and you can choose different themes. There's a search. So I want to search for chapter, and you can find it. It's all very nice. And if there's more than one page, you can use left and right to go through the pages. So let's add some stuff to that, shall we? So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to vim into the summary, and I'm going to add another chapter. So right below it, I'm going to add chapter 2. And save that. Again, if I build that, go to the the file, and I'll just refresh it, and you can see immediately on the left we got a second chapter. Click on that, and there we go. You got the next page and previous page there, and But going back and forth and building it and just doing this all the time, it just takes effort. So there's a couple of things you can do instead. First of all, you can do mdBook watch, and what that will do, it will just listen for changes, and it will run the build automatically as soon as you save a file. But I still got to go to the web browser and actually reset this page. What I can do instead is I can type in mdBook serve, and that will start a web server on the localhost 3000, and it also watch at the same time. So if I do that, and then let me get that running, and let me add another bash shell there. Which directory I was in. I was on P drive. There we go. So I can now start changing things and have them appear alive. Okay, so switching back to this, I'm not going to use this anymore. I'm going to use localhost 3000. If I refresh, you can see it's running via the web server. So as I type now, if I want to go into chapter 1, I can now say, this is the awesome documentation. Save it, and straight away you're gonna see the change. So this is all great. Another thing is useful is that going back to the summary, if I want to add another chapter, let me add a sub chapter. So by tabbing in and by indenting it, I can create a sub chapter under the chapter 1. And this file name, chapter_1_1 md, doesn't exist right now. But as soon as I save it, it will create that file for you with a default stuff. And
is that only when you're running watch as well, or is that just the default behavior all the time?
No, that's when you do serve, but I think with watch as well. But I don't use watch because I much prefer the server thing. Mm-hmm. I spelled chapter wrong, so let me fix that. And if I bring up chapter 1, yeah. Let's save those. Okay, so it's fixed. Maybe you don't want an actual page for the root page here, right? So maybe you want a chapter 3 and then a 3.1, but you don't actually want a chapter 3 markdown. So what we can do there in the summary, I can add a chapter 3, but I can just do an empty parentheses. And then underneath that, I can do chapter 3.1 and chapter 3.1.md, and then save that. And you will see that you'll see darkened out the chapter 3. There's nothing to click on there, but we still got the chapter 3.1. I can show you some titles and what a markdown looks like. So let's give that a go. Let's just go to chapter 1.1, and let's add a subtitle, and then we'll add a table, name, type, and we can. He's my dog, he's a dog. And Fifi, I don't know who that is, but Pani, she's a cat. So you can do that, and then just switch back, and you can see a table being rendered, and the subtitle there, and so forth. Right. So that is basically it, really. Once you've done that, you can go into if you look into the book, you'll have your entire website there. You can drop that off on some server and or CDN and just feed it to your consumers through the browser. Okay. So that's basically mdBook. You know how to do documentation in mdBook now. That's pretty much all there is. But it can go further. And I want to talk about Mermaid Diagrams. And Mermaid Diagrams are diagrams that can be generated through their own proprietary language. And I think it's used in the JavaScript world, but it's essentially it's a graph diagram drawing tool. And you can see all about it on mermaid.js.org. It supports multiple diagram types and is actually supported by GitHub. So when you have a file, a Markdown file in GitHub, it will actually render the Markdown for you with the titles, the tables, and so forth. In fact, if you have a readme.md in the root of your repo, GitHub will, when you look at your repo, will render that README file. What I discovered recently, as I was using Mermaid through for mdBook and dropping the Markdown files in GitHub, I discovered that GitHub actually supports Mermaid as well. So if you do diagrams in Markdown files, with or without mdBook, you can drop them in the repo and GitHub will display it quite nicely. So how do we use Mermaid? It has its own language, and essentially you treat it like code. You do the 3 backticks, you do Mermaid next to that, and then you insert the code that you need that describes the diagrams you have. And we can see on the right there, like a ton of diagram types it supports: flowcharts, sequence diagrams, a ton of things there. And it's sometimes really convenient to have access to this diagram drawing stuff when you're writing technical documentation. Yeah, I didn't know it supported mind maps until recently as well. I haven't tried it, but I'm quite excited to do that. Actually, maybe we can try a mind map when I demo it. Which, but before I do that, I'm going to talk about how you install Mermaid. Now, the mdBook and -Mermaid crate. It's been well written, I've got to say. Some plugins need some sort of manual labor to integrate them into mdBook, but not Mermaid mdBook. So you just cargo install it as usual, and you go into the folder with your book toml, and you just do mdBook -Mermaid install. And what that will do, it will copy some CSS files in there, some JavaScript files there. It will edit your book toml to switch on these plugins, and they're called processors or preprocessors in mdBook terminology. And it will just do it all for you, and that's literally it. You just do those 2 commands, and now you got Mermaid support. So let me show you an example of creating a simple flowchart. I'm doing this from memory, so hopefully I won't screw it up. Okay, so our server is still running, and we want to do in chapter 1. We want to do an awesome flowchart to go along with our awesome documentation. So let's go in Vim source. So yeah, I need to add the Mermaid first. So I'm going to go mdBook Mermaid install. And if I don't do it out commands, oh, it's not a clap thing. So I just do install, and that's done. And if you look inside the book, you can see it's added a bunch of stuff there. The additional JavaScript, the commands to switch on that preprocessor, and also if you look inside your folder now, you have those minified JavaScript things that will drive the Mermaid, the diagram drawing tool. So let's go ahead and start. doing some stuff here. So I'm going to do a flow chart. So we do a 3 backticks, we do mermaid, and then you type in flow chart, which is a type of diagram. I wanted to go from top to down, so you put TD. And this is a custom language for Mermaid. You have to go to the Mermaid website to learn this. And let's start with something simple. Start, stop. Let's do that first. Let's save it, and we switch to and there's definitely there's a syntax error, and I'm going to have to look up
capital TD. I think.
What? Sorry.
Capital TD.
Is it? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Have you used a Mermaid then?
I've used it a little bit, but I thought you might, just because I remember the syntax being fiddly, I was like, I'll just look it up just in case.
You're absolutely right. So for flowcharts, they're curved when they have curved boxes when you use them. So you can just do this. Save that. I think that does it. Oh, what's going on? I've never done a flow chart before, so let's have a look. Mermaid tutorials. We can look at flow charts. So apparently, you've got to do the text afterwards. So what I have to do is the ID there, and then the text afterwards, and it's rounded. So let's try with the decision. So if I can let me do decision, and decision goes that. So right, we got decision. Let's make it a diamond shaped. I think you do it like that. No. Oh, no. It's braces. Okay. And maybe we want we have data. Maybe if we do have data, we can do yes, and then we'll go to our database, which I think is like this. And I can put no. Yeah. So, quite quickly, I was able to do a flow chart to describe some stuff. Unfortunately, it's not lined up as I would normally like to see it, perhaps. But, to get something quick and in your documentation, it's really useful. Of course, if you want perfect control, you wouldn't use Mermaid. You'd use some other tool to render that diagram. But, that just took me a few minutes. Now, let's look at the mind maps. So I'd be very interested to see how these work.
Got a question in the chat as well, Matt. How do these actually render in the end? So there's obviously the preprocessor with creating those JavaScript files and using those JavaScript files, but does it like render to SVG, or is it calling out to the Mermaid live book when you serve the page? What's it doing?
It's not calling out. It renders the images, but whether they're SVG or PNGs, I don't know. We can have a look. Let's have a look at the book. Or maybe it's just JavaScript. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think it. I think it's just drawing. I don't think this. I think it may be using a canvas perhaps, and just drawing it. I don't think it's going over to the Mermaid server. I'm pretty sure, but I'm not 100%. I haven't given it much thought, to be honest. But that is a good question. Don't know. That's your homework. If you find out, and then let us know. Okay, so let's go back to we want to do a mind map. See what that looks like. Mind map. I think you got to do root, and then you indent it, and let's say we're thinking of Rust and CPP. And I failed straight away. What did I do wrong? Is it tab? Is it 2 spaces? Doesn't seem to be working. Don't know why. I'll have to look at that another time.
It might not be supported everywhere yet, because I know some parts aren't necessarily supported.
Yeah, I might not have updated. Did I install it today? Or I can't remember if I installed it today or. Okay, let's have a look.
Maybe Plus happens to be some kind of special symbol.
Sorry, you're breaking up there. I didn't quite.
Maybe Plus happens to be some special symbol in Mermaid. Just guessing.
Oh, that. No, that's a good thought though. Oh well. It also might be that I don't.
I think Mind Map's experimental Mermaid API. I don't think it's stable yet, so it might not be supported by mdBook Mermaid.
Yeah, there you go. Then that's a shame. Maybe in a few months. So fingers crossed for that. I personally use the sequence diagrams and the graph diagrams a lot for work, and I'm really happy they're there. Okay, so that is the end of that demo. So other features of mdBook, there are more plugins. For example, there's one called Page Talk, which I use a lot, which is a bit fiddly to get set up, but it's not too hard. And that produces, finds all the titles and subtitles in your mdBook file and displays them on the right side of the screen. You can add bash completions. There's a subcommand in mdBook that just registers them. So the commands in mdBook which can be tab completed. As I said, there's a backend plugin system, and people do a few. Something I haven't shown, and the reason I haven't shown it is because I haven't used it. But this, you can do math equations using the math jacks. It's kind of like a latex looking thing where you enter equations using some sort of text-based language, and it should be able to draw those complex calculus equations that you all love. Oh, bad grammar on the next one. You can do Rust code in the documentation, and you can actually run. So the missing word there was run. You can actually run Rust code actually from mdBook. So by adding the Rust code in, you'll see a little play button in the top right corner of that code block. You can hit it, and it will run it on the Rust playground, and then show the results. So if you wanted to write, it's great for writing Rust documentation, and you've probably seen that if you looked at the book online. Yep, it will run Rust. I said it again. And the syntax highlighting for many popular languages, even including Java. If you're feeling a bit masochistic, you can put Java code in and it'll be syntax highlighted. And the search built in for free as well. So thank you. That's all I got to talk about it. I hope you guys inspired to go write the best documentation ever for your projects. As I said, I find it very useful for work. Quite often, my mdBook folder gets stored in the repo alongside my project, so it's fully documented. And I think it's just a wonderful tool. Yeah, that's it. Any questions?
So you're saying you found it really, really useful lately. Is there any situations where you think it could be improved, or you don't find it quite as useful?
Well, mind maps for starters.
Yeah, apart from that.
I don't know. Actually, I haven't really given it much thought. You can customize it a lot using the CSS and JavaScript, but I kind of like the idea that it is simple. That I can teach it within an hour, and you pretty much know everything about it. And so whenever I feel like I will need to write documentation, I haven't forgotten how to use it. I just carry on, and there's no obstacle in my way. So any sort of feature I might think of at the time for any particular kind of documentation, for me, it's entirely forgivable, and I don't mind. Maybe perhaps integration of Rust doc in it would be interesting to generate some sort of index, or which can just go straight to doc.rs.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm wondering. Yeah, I'm wondering. I think it might do that already. There might be support for linking to actual source code. I haven't really fully tested that, so I invite you all to do that as well, because I'm pretty sure you can click on names, and it will just jump to the documentation. But yeah, answering your question, no, I love it. It's great. Sometimes tools don't need to be fully featured.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thanks very much for the presentation, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, that was great. And to update folks, so for the meetup, we are planning on trying to get better at writing up what happens in meetups after the fact. So we obviously post the videos to YouTube, but we're gonna hopefully start using the repo that we have, the GitHub org that we have, to more actively, so people can, like, who want to do a talk, if they don't want to like message us or whatever, can maybe do like a pull request with a calendar, that kind of thing. And maybe what we're thinking is that we can host like information about previous meetups in using mdBook, using like the GitHub site that you get with every org. So watch this space.
This week in Rust, Cardiff.
Exactly. But yeah. Right. Does anyone have any more questions before I share?
Yeah, I would also thank you very much, Matt. It was quite inspiring, especially for me. I must admit I use Wired for diagrams, so it took a lot of time, and I think this text-based format of Mermaid, it's much more convenient. And I also, what I always happen to end up is with some Doxygen based documentation in these C projects. And yeah, you can bring what's quite great, but I think especially for some like technical documentation that's not too near to code, like this mdBook is really awesome. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's great. I love it, because it actually encourages me to write documentation. Like I even when I'm trying to learn stuff, like I was working using the WGPU crate, which has a lot of complex connections between different types of objects. You create your instance, and you create your adapter from that, and you create your queue and your device objects. And I was struggling to keep track of it, so I decided to use mdBook to write down my notes. So just using Markdown just to write your notes, with or without mdBook is quite useful. But I was writing my notes and using Mermaid to do the diagrams, so doing the relationships between the different types of objects and putting text, and I was able just to write that out quickly and effortlessly. I didn't have to dig out some sort of art package, and then I just put them together, and I was building a knowledge base of how to use WTPU, which I can go back to, right? So I'm documenting as I'm learning. Another thing I've used it for, like I've worked at a new company now for a few months, and I'm a video game programmer, and I work with a lot of back-end developers who know all about networks and certificates and things like that. And I don't. And what I've been doing is I've been combining ChatGPT 4 with mdBook. So I would ask a question: what is this? Could you explain to me, like I'm 5, what this concept is? And I get a ton of text from ChatGPT, and I literally just cut and paste it and drop it in the Markdown. And I started building up these sections. I got a section about networks, and then underneath there I might put down certificates or UDP or TCP and that kind of stuff. And just ChatGPT, hey, can you explain to me how TCP works? How do you handle network congestion? Whatever question I can think of, there's the answer. I pull it out, drop it in my mdBook. And I'm building up my own personalized knowledge base, which I can just post on a website if I want to, get access to whenever I feel like it. So I think it's a great tool for when you combine it with other things as well.
So you get a lot of, much more structure of your ChatGPT prompts with the mdBook. Yeah, I see.